The Awakening of the Dead. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the small, isolated village of Eldridge in a cold, unyielding darkness. Nestled deep within a dense forest, the village had long been forgotten by the outside world, a place where time stood still and shadows danced with the wind. Thomas, a historian fascinated by lost places, had heard whispers of Eldridge's sinister past. The village was said to harbor a curse, one that brought the dead back to life. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, he set out to uncover the truth, armed with little more than a lantern and his notebook. As Thomas trudged through the thick underbrush, the forest seemed to close in around him, the trees' gnarled branches clawing at the sky. The air grew colder, and an uneasy silence settled over the land. The path ahead was barely visible, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Upon reaching Eldridge, Thomas was struck by the village's eerie stillness. The houses were crumbling relics, their wooden frames rotting and windows shattered. An unsettling feeling washed over him as he ventured deeper into the village, his lantern casting long, flickering shadows on the ground. He came upon an old chapel at the center of Eldridge, its doors hanging ajar. Inside, the pews were covered in a thick layer of dust, and cobwebs adorned the corners. The altar, once a symbol of hope, was now a decayed remnant of a forgotten faith. Thomas approached it, his footsteps echoing in the hollow space. Behind the altar, he discovered a trapdoor partially concealed by debris. His heart pounded as he pried it open, revealing a stone staircase descending into darkness. With a deep breath, he began his descent, the lantern's light barely piercing the thick gloom. The air grew colder as he ventured further down, and an unsettling smell of decay filled his nostrils. At the bottom of the stairs, he found himself in a vast underground chamber. The walls were lined with ancient, crumbling tombs, each one marked with a name long forgotten. A sudden noise shattered the silence, a low, guttural growl that sent chills down Thomas's spine. He turned, lantern held high, and saw movement in the shadows. Emerging from the darkness was a figure, its skin pale and rotting, eyes vacant and hollow. It was a corpse, but it moved with an unnatural hunger. Thomas stumbled backward, his lantern flickering as the zombie lunged at him. He managed to dodge its grasp, but more figures were stirring, awakening from their eternal slumber. The chamber filled with the sounds of shuffling feet and raspy breaths, the dead drawn to the living intruder in their midst. Desperation fueled Thomas's actions as he fled through the maze of tombs, the zombies close behind. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew thick with the stench of death. He could hear their relentless pursuit, their moans growing louder and more frenzied. In his frantic escape, Thomas tripped and fell, the lantern shattering on the ground. Darkness enveloped him, and he could feel the cold, bony hands of the dead closing in. Panic surged through him as he realized the gravity of his mistake. He had awakened an ancient horror that could not be stopped. With a final surge of strength, Thomas scrambled to his feet and bolted for the staircase. The zombies were relentless, their decayed forms moving with a terrifying speed. He reached the stairs and climbed, the dead clawing at his heels. Bursting through the trapdoor, he slammed it shut and barricaded it with whatever he could find. The growls and moans of the undead echoed through the chapel, a grim reminder of the horrors below. Exhausted and terrified, Thomas fled Eldridge, vowing never to return. The village of Eldridge remained a cursed place, its dark secrets buried beneath the ground. Thomas's encounter with the undead would haunt him for the rest of his days, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked in forgotten corners of the world. And as the village faded back into obscurity, the dead waited, their hunger for the living undiminished. Thomas's encounter with the undead left him scarred, both physically and mentally. Nightmares plagued his sleep, vivid and horrific memories of the zombies haunting his every dream. He could not shake the feeling that the curse of Eldridge had followed him, a dark shadow looming over his life. Determined to find closure, he began researching the village's dark history, hoping to uncover a way to end the curse once and for all. Weeks turned into months, and Thomas's obsession grew. He discovered that Eldridge's curse dated back to a group of occultists who had sought to cheat death by performing forbidden rituals. The key to stopping the undead, he learned, was to destroy the source of their power, an ancient artifact hidden deep within the village's underground chamber. Armed with this newfound knowledge and a renewed sense of purpose, Thomas gathered a group of friends who believed in his story. Among them were Sarah, an archaeologist with a fascination for the supernatural, and James, a former soldier skilled in survival tactics. Together, they set out for Eldridge, determined to put an end to the curse. The journey back to Eldridge was fraught with tension. The forest seemed even more oppressive, its twisted branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to ensnare them. As they approached the village, a thick fog rolled in, blanketing the area in an eerie silence. Thomas's heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. The group made their way to the chapel, its decrepit facade even more foreboding in the dim light. Inside, the air was heavy with a sense of foreboding. They found the trapdoor Thomas had escaped from months earlier and prepared to descend into the darkness once more. With lanterns in hand and weapons at the ready, they ventured down the stone staircase, the smell of decay growing stronger with each step. The underground chamber was, as Thomas remembered, a labyrinth of tombs and shadows. The atmosphere was thick with an unnatural coldness, and the silence was broken only by the faint sound of shuffling feet in the distance. As they moved deeper into the chamber, the group encountered the first of the undead. Sarah's flashlight beam caught the pale, rotting figure of a zombie lurching towards them. James stepped forward, his military training kicking in as he fired a shot, the sound echoing through the chamber. The zombie fell, but more emerged from the shadows, drawn by the noise. A fierce battle ensued, the group fighting off the relentless horde with a mix of firearms and improvised weapons. The air was filled with the stench of decay and the moans of the undead. Despite their fear, Thomas and his friends pressed on, determined to reach the artifact and end the curse. In the heart of the chamber, they found a hidden door covered in arcane symbols. Sarah deciphered the markings, revealing the way to the occultist's ritual chamber. Inside, they discovered a pedestal adorned with a sinister-looking relic, a dark crystal pulsating with a malevolent energy. As Thomas reached for the crystal, the air grew colder, and a sense of dread washed over him. The zombies, sensing their power source was in danger, grew more frenzied, their attacks more desperate. With a final surge of courage, Thomas grasped the crystal and shattered it against the stone floor. A deafening roar filled the chamber as the crystal's power was released, the energy dissipating into the air. The zombies froze, their lifeless bodies collapsing to the ground. The oppressive coldness lifted, and the air grew still. Exhausted and covered in grime, Thomas and his friends emerged from the underground chamber, the dawn light breaking through the fog. The curse of Eldridge had been lifted. The undead banished back to their eternal rest. The village, though still decayed and forgotten, no longer held the same malevolent presence. As they left Eldridge behind, Thomas felt a sense of closure. The nightmares that had haunted him would fade, replaced by a hard-earned peace. The village's dark history had been brought to light, and the curse that had plagued it for centuries was finally broken. But the memory of their descent into dread would remain, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows of forgotten places. Like, subscribe and share for more interesting stories.